Welcome back. You are listening to the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM with co-hosts Diane Mathewitz, Don O'Neill, Paul McLennan, and our guest for this segment is the fabulous Allison Johnson. And I want to say that we have been following this struggle with the neighborhoods around Turner Field since really the announcement of the sale. And the issues of displacement and the loss of affordable housing in the city is one of the biggest, not only just issues, but one of the biggest problems working class folks in the city face at this moment, as prices for rent and prices for homes keep escalating at an astonishing rate. And jobs, the salaries for the most part, the wages for the most part, cannot possibly meet that kind of rent agreements. So, Allison, thank you so much for coming here today.
You're welcome.
And so, just in case there's a person who really doesn't know why all those tents are sitting on the corner there by Turner Field, could you give us some background about how the Turner Field Coalition, Benefits Coalition came to be, the Housing Justice League's role, your particular participation? Okay.
Sure. So I'll start with how the coalition came about to be. The coalition started about 3.5 years ago when the Braves first announced that they were leaving the area. Concerned residents, community stakeholders, and other philanthropies thought that it would be a great idea to get together to begin to organize, particularly long-term residents who had been in the area for a while, of how we go about seeing the available properties redeveloped for the needs of the community. So we began to organize communities. We organized hundreds of residents. We kept them engaged to a process which we felt like that their voices would be heard and they would be listened to about the development that was far overdue to the impacted areas around Turner Field and what's happening in that redevelopment area. So once that got kicking, we met quarterly with residents and stakeholders, and then we began to meet monthly because we knew that this was getting really serious. And when the bid went out for the RFP, the request for proposal, and it came back that Georgia State and Carter Developments were going to be the new owners of the property, we were seriously worried because we know from reading other cities' community benefits agreement that educational institutions were somehow gentrifiers in communities. So we began the process of creating a document that we thought that every resident around the impacted area, we would use that as a platform to raise their voices, to raise their concerns, and again, to see the type of development that they want to be a part of and the type of development that needed to be in the community that would most be beneficial to impacted residents in that area. So we created a document which was called a Community Benefits Agreement, and we worked on that with experts, residents, people who have lived and worked at different types of jobs. We engaged with unions. We engaged with educational leaders, different higher educational institutions to help us create this document. And once this document was created, we thought that it would be a wonderful idea to propose that as our community benefits agreement. So we're here today. It's been 3 years. We still have not had an opportunity to negotiate the document. This document is linked to components about good infrastructure, which you know it floods in that area. And we talk about design, what design is really good to keep people who've been in that community there for longer terms. And we talk about arts and education. As you know, the schools in those impacted areas are lagging and they're being underserved, and our kids are coming out undereducated, and they're creating a pipeline to prisons. And we talked about how to combat and mitigate those issues in terms of how Georgia State could play a major role in being this transformational institution in serving those communities and serving those schools. And we talked about the housing crisis that's happening all over Atlanta. We had a anti-displacement component in the community benefits agreement, and it talks about how to incentivize developers with using the areas, medium incomes, particularly with people who've been in the area for a long time, and how do they not become displaced because of your development. And we also talked about the risk of having the new neighbors in our communities, because they will bring risk in our communities. And the highest risk is displacement. And there's other risks with crime analysis, and sometimes people get the wrong perception of what crime really is. They see students or kids hanging out on a block, and they are automatically assuming that they are involved in some type of criminal activity. So all of those things, components, are linked in that community benefits agreement, and to how each entity can be accountable for what they can be accountable for. And we understand that Georgia State cannot totally be responsible for all of the anti-displacement, that each entity is responsible for. Carter and Associates, Oakwood and Associates, the city of Atlanta has a role to play in this, because there's an ordinance on the table that says the developers must use the city's guidelines as it proposed to the income area, median income. So if we're talking about 20%, they must provide 20% of the units at 60% of the AMI, then they must do that. Then we must hold the city accountable. So we are still in the stages of negotiating a community benefits agreement. We haven't begun yet. We're in the very baby stages of that. So in the meanwhile, the organization that I affiliate with is the Housing Justice League. Just one of many organizations in the coalition, and we do a lot of the outreach, boots on the ground, street heat. So we decided, and the coalition decided, that we would do a march, an anti-displacement march. And out of that march became a protest. And we decided that a part of the campaign would be Tent City. And that Tent City is happening at 755 Hank Aaron Drive and Ralph David Abernathy, and we're in our 45th day of the protest.
So this is 45 days being outside in tents on the corner of Hank Aaron Drive. People living outside for 45 days, right, Allison?
Exactly, 45 days, where the days become too long and the nights become too short for any rest. But we have been there for 45 days, and we are literally living there, sleeping there, we're serving there. We are having all types of activities there because, again, this is our home for right now, hopefully temporarily.
What are some of the activities that's been going on out there at Tent City?
Where we're asking people sometimes that if they have meetings, that we are available. And we open the space to people who want to have meetings there. The Housing Justice League has a monthly mass meeting, and we meet there on Tuesdays. Tomorrow we will have our meeting there. There have been different organizations that have their meetings there on the site. We have movie nights where we try to inspire people. We have flyering at rush hour. There are all kind of activities that go there. We have different conversations, strategy meetings, a lot of things that are happening at Tent City.
So Allison, I want to ask, you've had, I don't know how many demonstrations, there have been sit-ins at President Becker's office at Georgia State. People have gotten arrested. Students have been told they were barred and banned from campus for this protest. There have been many kinds of tactics that have been used in this struggle. And I was hoping you could say, I was at movie night this past Saturday, and you have a potluck tonight. And so it is a very interesting community that has gathered there at that site. And I think in some ways it reflects the kind of community that you are hoping that this community benefits agreement, because it's students and residents and people from actually other parts of the city who are interested in making sure that affordable housing and residents get some say when these glass cylinders and glass cubes and very inhospitable looking buildings get put up and get plopped into people's neighborhoods and become sort of, I don't even know what to describe them, alien creatures in your neighborhood. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about some of the key parts of this benefits agreement so that people can understand how absolutely logical they are. What is it you actually want Carter, GSU, Oakwood, all those to sign on to?
Well, first of all, if you know anything about that area, you know that there's a lot of divestment that's happening over the last 8 decades. Families have been displaced from their area for the last 8 decades, either by highways or either by mega developments of stadiums of the sort. But the thing about this project is that there may not be another project there for another 7 or 8 decades. And it's the most important project right now in the city of Atlanta, actually in the southeast region, because it connects to everything. As a long-term resident who was displaced from the Summer Here community by the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, being placed into the Peoplestown community, we particularly want to see development that is going to be for the people that's there, which will include affordable housing where people can transition from rental into home ownership. We want to see good, meaningful wage jobs where people are really trained and are really good skilled workers, where they're not making $10 an hour. We want to see $15 an hour wages and up. And they have the means and the metrics to do so. We also want to see where Peoplestown is not getting the brunt of the flooding that's happening. We want really good infrastructure that's going to really mitigate this flooding and not cause people to get sick. We don't want any more expressways. It's going to cause higher rates of asthma. And we want our education institutions to rise. We have been without for the last 8 decades, and it's horrible when people don't think of you enough to invest in you, and you finally think you have an opportunity to say, here's what we want. This is what's going to strengthen our community, and this is what's going to help our community grow. This is what's going to stabilize us. These components are not weak components. We worked on them for 3 years. We have said what we want. We've talked to them about, and the most important thing right now, again, and I'm going to keep reiterating, is non-displacement, anti-displacement, because if we're not there, then we're not going to be able to partake in any of these great amenities that are going to be supposedly for the communities. But our main goal, and as a member of this Housing Justice League, is to make sure that residents are not displaced. We've already had a block where 4 families have been displaced within the last 4 months. And all of these families are low-income homeowners. Some of them are habitat owners. We're seeing that people are coming in and buying the homes away from the habitat owners and jacking the prices up. We want some of those homes to go back to habitat where their land, there's a land deed restriction where they will always be affordable for the next 99 years. We want to see where Georgia State, you have the resources to put paraprofessionals in each classroom, particularly at the elementary stage. And we want, Carter, we want you to invest in housing, in good housing. Again, that's going to benefit us.
Now you see why I called her the fabulous Allison. We have just a couple minutes left, so Allison, if you want to give our listeners some information about how they can get in touch with Housing Justice League or the Turner Fields Benefit Coalition, if there's any, if you want to repeat again the information about your mass meeting tomorrow night.
Sure. The Housing Justice League mass meeting, Tuesday, 7 o'clock, Tip City, ATL, 755 Hank Aaron Drive. Housing Justice League, ATL.org on Facebook or Twitter. Turner Field Benefits Coalition website is just what it is. Turner Field Community Benefits Coalition.
Any last comments or questions for anybody else?
I'm just proud to know that there are people in this city who are working to hold public institutions accountable. It's our money, and our money is being used and transferred to give private interests wealth, and that's crazy.
And that was one of the things that, and I can't go into a lot of details, but one of the developers of the property continued to reiterate to us that they were a private development, but we kept reminding him that you purchased public land.
Yes.
And we're going to continue to say that public land is our land and it would not be stolen away from us.
All right, Alice.
Thank you so much.